Hello, everyone. It's really good to see everyone here. I meant it because some people, some friends here know that yesterday I just came back to New York from my first 8-day sailing trip in the British Virgin Islands. So I have survived, and there's no personal injury, no apparent head damage, no grounding, and no capsize. So good to see everyone. My name is Deng. I'm a newly promoted partner in the transportation industry group at Reed Smith in New York. So I work with my colleague. Oh, thank you. It's not hard. It's not easy for me, for sure, because I'm originally from China. I went to law school at Tulane in New Orleans, and I started my legal career here 12 years ago, thanks to Dan Rogers, who gave me a job. So yeah, it has been a journey. So I work with my colleague Greg Chase, who is on a business trip today. He sent his warm regards from Greece. So he was kind enough to prepare my following speech. So I will try to make this shorter. So at Reed Smith, we are active in ship finance and other capital formation exercises for shipping. Acting for owners, banks, and private equity funds. Reed Smith is a true one-stop shop with more than 30 offices across the US and around the world. And we regularly staff our deals with teams working across offices from Greece to London, to New York, to Hong Kong, Singapore, and Shanghai. So today, I am very pleased to introduce the legendary Mr. Robert Bugbee as our keynote luncheon speaker. So he has been my role model ever since I was a law school student at Tulane. From his days as president of OMI Corporation to the launching of Scorpio tankers in 2010 and Scorpio bulkers in 2013, not to mention the admiration he garnered for the tremendous growth of both of these platforms, and more recently, the transition of Scorpio bulkers to NET in 2021. Mr. Bugbee has long been one of the shipping industry leaders we all want to hear most from. Mr. Bugbee has been a director and the president of NET since 2013. He has served as a director and president of Scorpio Tankers since its initial public offering in April 2010. Before that, Mr. Bugbee was a member of the management team at OMI Corporation, a New York Stock Exchange-listed tanker company since 1995, and was serving as its president when OMI was sold in 2007. Robert was educated at the University of London and the Norwegian School for Economics and Business Administration. All told, he has more than 36 years in the shipping industry. Over the years, Mr. Bugbee's sage wisdom, keen market insight, resilient optimism, and great sense of humor have set the tone for numerous industry conferences. For my part, in this significant post-pandemic moment, when the entire world seems to be in flux, I think we are very fortunate to have Mr. Bugbee with us today for his remarks over lunch. His observations will no doubt shape the way many of us will look at year ahead. Without further ado, it is a true pleasure to welcome Mr. Bugbee to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we can all agree with words like that. That lady's going to go very far in shipping, right? So I just sort of want to sort of know where I stand here, who I can be rude to, who I can't be. So let's do a quick show of hands. How many Norwegians or Norwegian heritage do we have here today? Okay, and how many Greeks? Oh, it's going to be a hard day for the Norwegians then. Okay, look, I've studied ancient Greek. I guess we're coming to my credentials. And I've actually studied in Norway. I think it's great that we're here at Appella to discuss geopolitics. I mean, I think this is named after the ancient Spartan assembly that discussed foreign policy and its own strategic views. So it's the right place to be. I don't know how many of you know this, but the first person who coined the term geopolitik was actually a Swede called Rudolf Schellen. So you Norwegians will be gratified to know that we can blame everything on a Swede, okay? Geopolitical goals and strategies can change. Take Norway. Hundreds of years ago, it disguised activities of extortion, blackmail, robbery, particularly on the English, as fun cruises for the boys. Today, its geopolitical goals are much kinder. It uses its tremendous carbon-derived wealth to try and persuade us all to use more renewable, cleaner energy sources and be better humans in society. Okay, they still have those cruises, but now it's really for the whole family. I was wondering why I was asked to be the guest speaker at a geopolitical conference held by the Nordic Hellenic community. And then it became very clear to me. I was born English. What other country in the world has had such a clear geopolitical strategy and achieved so much of that strategy? We were toughened by the Vikings and educated by the ancient Greeks. We were inspired by heroic stories of both. England was once and started as this tiny little country. And then we added Scotland and Wales and called it Britain. And then we figured that that didn't sound tough enough if we were going to go out and get colonies and get an empire. So to make everyone feel better, we called it Great Britain, right? And we told you Great Britain was going to come and get you. Then we managed to colonize 3/5 of the world. This ensured cheap materials, labor, and projected power across the globe. Now, of course, it's not so popular, the history of colonization. So we've kind of had to change that strategy. And now a cunning plan that can now be revealed has been really enacted over the last 12 years. We, through the misnamed Conservative Party, and 12 years of Oxford-educated, ever-changing prime ministers to make sure the plan could never be discovered, are now showing that geopolitical goals can change and even reverse. England is now hell-bent on taking the great out of Great Britain, which has been pretty much achieved, I think we'd all agree, and putting back the little in Little England. It is becoming a story of atonement, restoration, reformation, but most of all, hope. You really can change. So, in the field of geopolitical forecasts of what can happen, I firmly believe anything can happen. So the best strategy is actually not to worry too much about the geopolitics, certainly not let it paralyze your life. Just don't worry, be happy. Look, overall our industry is in great times. We should be optimistic. I'm permanently optimistic, obviously. You have to be optimistic in this industry to remain sane and keep going at times. But there are special occasions like now where you can be really optimistic. And that's based on the fact that, I think that we will continue to grow. And despite what's happening, trade will continue to grow. I think that the youth of all of the nations around the world are, very energized, super educated compared to their elders, and are really looking forward and wanting things to happen. And so that will provide for the growth of trade and the growth of economies. And maybe if it won't just be about individual economies, maybe we'll bring forward the economies of South America, of Africa, and of some of the poorer regions in Asia. So I'm very optimistic, therefore, of what's happening. And if we look at shipping in itself, there just isn't the supply of ships on order. Order books in many of the fleets and many of the key fleets are at record lows. Shipyards have been consolidated. And so that's going to help. So what are we facing at Scorpio Tankers? We'll start with Scorpio Tankers first. It may be the easiest one. What's the geopolitical things on the horizon here? Well, we talked about Taiwan. I don't lose any sleep over Taiwan. I mean, it's a given to me that the Chinese won't forget about Taiwan. It's a given to me that Chinese will go for it in the future. But it's such an enormous thing should it happen. It's, that you kind of can't think about it on an everyday basis. You just have to put it to the back of your mind and get on with it. As an operator, as a politician, it may be different. The sanctions in Russia, it's kind of, again, I'm very bemused when I read a lot about, and investors, their permanent question is, what does this mean? What does this mean in terms of product exports from Russia? Are Russia going to cut them back? Are they going to ship on crude? What are Russia going to do? What is Russia going to do? This is completely the wrong way, I think, to look at this, because the US and Europe, Australia, Japan may have sanctioned Russia supply, but nobody has sanctioned South American, African, East Asian, European, North American demand. So we have to look at the product market from the demand side, not the supply side. And it becomes then very simple and relaxing. Wherever you get the extra demand from, to South America, to Europe, to Africa, it is going to have to be traveled further than it did before the Russian sanctions. Whatever. So therefore, it's going to be good. And because the product market is basically high utilization, we saw that going into Christmas. Even now, the utilization is extremely high. So whether that's a 1% growth, 2%, 3, 4, 5, it just doesn't matter. The rates are going to be great. The rates are going to provide a tremendous return to shareholders and investors. And ultimately, that will be the same for the crude oil market. Look what's happened for the crude oil market now. China's back in, and China's coming. We didn't expect that a month ago, 6 weeks ago, 10 weeks ago. We couldn't believe that China could be what we would call brutal in terms of opening up and not worrying about an entire generation, but just getting on with business. Well, when China comes back, it's going to be 2 million barrels plus. And that's a pretty well accepted number. It's an approximate number. If we don't have the United States SPR releases, then that's going to be 3 million plus of crude oil moving. So at the very least, that's going to put upward pressure on crude oil tanker rates. The difficulty, though, in all of that, the one difficulty is not to shipping with China coming back. It's to the story of inflation, because it's hard to see that there's not going to be a bid under oil now all the way through this year. And the environmental, we have another company called Scorpio, it's called Eneti, which we'll come to in a minute. But we can see from Eneti that all of the offshore wind projects, not all, but the majority of offshore wind, the curve has moved to the right. They've been set back by COVID. COVID set them back. Licensing is difficult. A country like the United States itself, licensing is going to be even harder. Everybody wants one, but not everyone wants a transmission terminal off their own coast. The second thing, it's hard to work out whether the government is really committed here or not, because they have an issue with offshore wind because of their Jones Act position. And they have only one shipyard that can build large offshore wind vessels. Those are debates. They also have one party now who I think is very encouraging that they're concerned with the whales. That's good, excellent, that they're finally concerned with wildlife. But that comes in direct opposition to offshore wind. So we're not sure there where that is. But if we go back to the products, and a mention of sanctions, and I would say this if the ambassador was president, I'll first start with we should all be thankful for the United States, really thankful. I mean, this is a country that had the biggest military power at the end of the Second World War that the planet had ever seen. Japan laid in waste. Russia was pretty down. Germany, even though it had beaten Germany, and Germany was, in a mess. The United States, for the first time a country had ever been in this position, didn't look to conquer land, didn't even look for reparations. The United States just rebuilt Germany with its own money, rebuilt Japan with its own money, and only asked in return for the countries to drink Coca-Cola and watch Walt Disney films. And occasionally just be courteous to them when they visited the countries, okay? So I know that the United States may not have done everything right, no one does, but they've done the most things right. And once again, they're standing in, trying to represent something and trying to keep things together. I would say that to the ambassador, but I would also say to him that not quite sure about sanctions in shipping. We've sanctioned Iran for a long time, and Iran still found ways to carry on exporting its oil. We're going to sanction Russia one step more on products, but it's still going to find ways, just as it's done with its oil, to get the stuff out. Because what's happening is, it's rather like when you read we're kids, and you read about sieging it, laying siege to a castle somewhere. And that's, it's great fun, those stories where, the lay siege to the castle, surround it, try and starve the people out. If they surrender early, well, you kind of take it over, but you don't kill everybody. But if they surrender too late, you kill everybody. The problem with this siege is you've kind of left half the castle unsurrounded. Every day they can just open the doors and get resupplied with food and trade, etc. So this is going to be a slow grind. That, of course, is going to add to the instability in oil, is going to be good for the markets. When we go back, so Scorpio tankers, pretty clear where it's going to go. If we look at Eneti, what's the theme there? The theme there is almost a north and south division on what to do with the environment and renewables. We went from this big charge before COVID, lots of money being raised for renewables, whether it was batteries or wind farms or solar panels, etc., to massive disappointment on returns, to now renewables are actually expensive, they've been delayed, etc., etc. So a question mark comes over the actual process itself. We're already talking about shortages of wind installation vessels. Again, that's good for Eneti in the same way as the Russia situation is good for products. It's just not good for, neither is good for society. So in a way, I'm talking a little bit against my own book or my own financial interests, but I'm saying what we're observing out there. We're seeing a crunch coming because the projects have largely been pushed to the side as opposed to cancelled. In fact, there's been an increase in some countries from their projects. This way, United States is in a real sort of flummox, actually. You know, it talks a good game when it comes to offshore wind, but at the moment it's pretty much only talk, because there are various things to do with their own dynamics of lack of yard capacity to build Jones Act vessels, combined with not an organized financing structure for offshore vessels, that is delaying the United States coming into the game for offshore wind. Fortunately for companies like ourselves and Cadler, there's so much business outside of this, it doesn't really matter. You're seeing a few things, a little creep on the horizon now. You know, BP coming out and saying, you know, this is BP. All those beautiful adverts they had on TV a couple of years ago. Do you remember them all? They were great, right? Now BP is sitting there saying, well, you know, we shouldn't just worry about the environment. We've really got to worry about profits too. Well, in the US, we've already had those signals for 6, 7, 8 months. You know, that big equity fund called, beginning with a B, who are too significant a shareholder in Sting for me to mention in any form of derogatory way, have suddenly gone from we're not going to invest in any carbon companies to, yeah, we're like one of the top 5 shareholders in all of the tanker companies, and well, of course, you know, we should be allowed to do this. And so this is the fighting between that. The other thing is the geopolitical, to bring back geopolitical, the geopolitical aims of Northern Europe and some of the other countries like Australia, New Zealand, basically the richer countries in the world, isn't really the aim of many of the other countries. Some of those countries that mentioned in South America, Africa, and Asia, they're just not rich enough to afford this in the short term. Now, obviously, the purist, I can hear some of my Norwegian friends saying to me, but Robert, you have to understand, of course they can afford it. If the planet goes down, they could have afforded anything. The reality is the world just doesn't work in that theoretical way. These countries cannot afford to not use carbon at the moment. They just can't afford to subsidize 85% of their country to buy electric cars like happens in Norway. They can't afford the budgets to do this. So they are going to carry on using carbon, fossil fuels along the way until we can do something to raise their actual living standards itself. So that is a conundrum. That, of course, again, is beneficial for Scorpio tankers because it means that most of Scorpio tankers' customers will continue to be customers for the foreseeable future anyway. But I think when we look at geopolitical, from us running 2 companies, one, let's say, in the past and the present, and one in the new present and the future, we can see these conflicts coming every single day that, you know, are going to need to be moved through. And that's sort of what we're seeing. I have a very consistent and long experience of predicting geopolitical events, you know, such as the first Gulf War, never on the radar, never once brought up on any of our board meetings. The currency crisis in 1997, never on the radar, never brought up once on our board meetings. 2001, September the 11th, never on the radar, never brought up on our meetings. 2008 financial crisis, never on the radar, never brought up on any of our board meetings. And COVID, never on the radar, never brought up on our board meetings. We have 100% record, right? Unbroken, unbroken through my entire career. So I just wanted to sort of correctly lay down my predictability credentials there. Thank you very, very much. Look, let's all have a great year. Look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.